Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Fundamentalists podcast. My name is Elliot Morgan, and I'm here with my co-host, Peter Rollins. Pete, we're back.
We're back.
I think this might be the first ever episode that gets uploaded to youtube.com/thevalleycast.
I'm very excited about that. So you were able to persuade the boys.
It took a lot of, Have you seen Ozark?
Only the first episode.
Oh, okay. Well, there's a whole season where they're trying to build a casino, and they're being very politician-y about it, and they're doing a lot of lobbying, and that's what it was like to make sure that this guy was on the Valleycast channel. For those who don't know, if you're new listeners or if you're a returning listener, good to see you again. Thanks for being here. We have not been consistent, and that's kind of our thing, which is nice.
Well, we recorded one last week.
Yes.
Yeah, on anxiety.
And because I completely forgot to turn my mic on.
As a YouTube professional.
Exactly. Yes, as someone who has so many podcasts, I didn't realize I have a lot of. I don't feel like a podcaster, but now with Grace and I doing the reality show podcast, and then the Fundamentalists, and then the Valleycast, I'm like, I should know way more about this than I do, but I just don't. I think the truth is I really don't like equipment, and I don't like technical shooting stuff.
You're amazing at how much you don't like that. Like whenever we started this, I thought you'd be like, putting the camera in a certain place, and you'd be getting everything sorted, and you're like, nope, I just don't care.
I don't give a crap.
Turn it on. And
Yep. I mean, I wish it's either got to be like so good that it actually is like quality where you got different shots of people and it zooms in, which is beyond my capability, or it's like, this is what you get. It's a single stagnant shot. Maybe some people throw in some fun stuff. Like I like on the Valleycast, Ryan edits that, and he throws in all these little like jokey things, little clips in the sides. I'm like, this makes it so much more interesting to listen to or watch. But this is a bare bone. This is about brain and philosophy. And really heady stuff.
No fun. That's
no
it.
Fun.
This is a no fun podcast.
Yes.
A no entertainment zone.
No entertainment. Yeah. Just as a recap, because it has been a while, Pete. First of all, how are you doing? We're in quarantine right now. And quick bio from your perspective for people who maybe would just, or like, who is this guy again?
So how am I? Is that the first question?
That's the first one, the most important.
Yeah, I'm doing good. I've been just doing what everybody else in the world's been doing. So that's fine. And I'm a writer, philosopher type, kind of, interested in, it's very hard to describe who you are. I hate it. If you describe who you are and then you look at that, it's like, that's not me. It feels very weird. So it's
very, also you have an amorphous job. Like I do. Yeah. And like most of my friends do. And it's difficult to put a label on it.
Yeah, put it on the business card.
But you're a smarty pants. You're a smart man.
Well, thank you for saying that. I don't feel that I am, but thank you.
And I enjoy our conversations, and we try to mix in life experiences with your philosophical studies and your philosophical ideas on things. This particular episode is about anxiety, which is the same topic that we had last week. Rest in peace, that episode. That was a good episode.
It was a good episode. Yeah, it was good. Yeah.
But it was just...
It was even better when I listened back because I couldn't hear you at all. I could just hear my bits. So
yeah, good for you. That's the way to fix it. And for people at home, that's also a good way to fix it. For everyone at home. Everyone's at home. I was like, an episode where I'm not recording, my mic is basically just a really nice conversation that we had. So now we're just going to have the conversation again. But exactly. It's a podcast if we're recording. If we're not recording, it's just a talk. So anxiety. A lot of people are experiencing it right now, Pete. A lot of people are holed away. A lot of people have forgotten how to be social around people. Even this feels kind of weird for me because I haven't seen another human being in a while, save for necessary trips out or whatever. But like, this is just do you feel strange? Do you feel weird? Is it like in my mind, I'm like, we're going to sit down, we're going to talk, we're going to pick up where we left off, riding a bike, but there's something really weird about this whole thing. Or do you not feel that way?
It is weird. But I'm interested in how different people are responding in different ways, and that's interesting. And some people get anxious and then they get drawn into kind of conspiracy theories like psychotic anxiety, and then some people are kind of finding it just kind of very people who are reclusive, I guess. This is just business as usual.
People who've already made a point to cut out the rest of the world, or like, this is all right. I
just feel like everybody else is now living like I live.
It is strange it's weird to me that it is a fight to get people to stay home. There is kind of a thing where I'm like, this is a gift. This is a once in a lifetime opportunity to not have to hang out with people or go to work, and we're still having to be like, you need to stay home. It's like, how is that a hard sell for people?
That's true.
But I guess people love being out. Like, it also seems like on the internet, introversion and social anxiety are such hot topics where people are, I can't go out, I can't do this, I'm an introvert. And then when something like this happens, it's like, where are all those people? All of a sudden, it seems like everybody wants to run out and be like gallivanting.
Yeah, well, when it's been prohibited, it makes it all the more exciting.
There it is. Now we're getting into
it. And Pascal once said, he said, like, something to the extent that the world's problems could be sorted if we all just were able to learn to be to sit in a chair on our own in silence.
Yeah.
But it's very, very hard for us to do. We want to keep our lives busy because it's not that anxiety's created, it's more that we confront the anxiety that's always been there, and that's what busyness kind of hides from us.
Oh yeah. The sitting on the couch and watching TV while playing a video game and looking at Reddit and social media is it definitely you can sit in a chair by yourself and just but is that just because of your crippling depression, or is it because you like it? How are you doing with the solitude? Do you like it?
Yeah,
me too. Let's keep it. We're also social distancing for those who are just listening and not watching. We are definitely over 6 feet apart. We have not touched or made out like we normally do.
Yeah.
But let's dive in, Pete. Anxiety. Okay. What do you got?
Yeah, so I thought this time round I'd like to start with the idea of freedom and Immanuel Kant and talk about what he means by the word freedom. And then that's going to lead us into what the philosopher Kierkegaard calls spirit.
Great.
And then that will lead us into a definition of anxiety. So I was thinking at the end of this podcast, we could have a really solid kind of definition of anxiety, what it is.
I hope that makes people feel comfortable and safe, and I have a feeling it won't.
Yeah, there you
go. Perfect.
So, I wanted to start off with Immanuel Kant because he, in some of his work, was trying to work out, are we free? Because there's that basic...
Free will.
Basic idea is like, is everything determined? Is everything just a crazy chain of cause and effect?
Yeah.
Right back to the beginning. And Kant had 3 phases where he tried to answer this. And the third phase is the interesting one. So the first phase, very quickly, is he was like, yeah, everything is completely determined. And then freedom...
Predetermination,
yeah.
Not predestination. Predestination is like the Calvinist thing, right? When you're like, the people who are going to hell, people who are going to heaven are chosen, basically.
But that's kind of like a theological version of it. Now, predestination is there's nothing you can do. Like your eternal destiny is signed, sealed, and delivered.
Which would be okay. Keep going before we die. Yeah. Let's keep going.
Okay. Yeah. Well,
I don't want to, because it wouldn't. This is good. Yeah. Wouldn't that be a very freeing philosophy if you believe that? If you believe that there's nothing you can do?
That's an interesting thing. Yeah. That's actually where I think the interesting bit of that philosophy is, because if you no longer, right, if you're damned no matter what.
Party time.
What's that?
Party time.
Either party time, or if you're nice, you're just doing it because you're nice. Like, rewards taken out of it. So there is a theory that actually Calvinism is an ethical frame, i.e., nobody acts because of eternal reward. You either an asshole or nice just because nothing you can do can change anything. So it actually reveals the type of character you've got. So that is an interesting kind of reading of that.
Okay.
But that's not what I was thinking of.
Let's get back.
Yeah. But yeah, Kant's first thing was freedom is simply that you subjectively countersign your fate. So you can't do any. So basically, you're not free if you're locked in your house and you want to go out. You're not free. But if you're locked in your house and you don't want to go out, you're free.
Yeah.
Because your subjective desire is countersigning your fate.
Yeah, it's I've had this with stand-up. I've been like, I don't stop doing LA stand-up shows a while back. And now, like a month into this thing, the fact that there's not stand-up shows out there that I could go do stand-up on is like weirding me out. I'm like, I want to go do stand-up. But it's because I can't do it. And when it is there, I'm like, no, I'm good.
Yeah. Well, that's going to get us to actually what anxiety is, that very feeling of the not at oneness of your desire with your actions. So that's
Great.
That's where this is going. But Kant's first attempt is simply to say freedom is embracing the facticity of your existence, countersigning what is already going to happen. And then he started to feel that that wasn't great. That's a very weak form of freedom. And so he developed a kind of a more substantial notion of freedom, which is, very briefly, he thinks that there's a phenomenal world, the world of our experience. Mm-hmm. Everything we see, everything we feel, and that's determined. Everything in the world of empiricism is determined. But he says that there is a noumenal realm. There's a realm that is outside of the empirical world, and it's pure freedom. And it's almost like if you have a chain of cause and effect, right? Everything's determined except for one thing, which is the first thing, because the first thing doesn't have a cause.
Sure.
So it's the uncaused cause. So he says that there's an element of the universe that is spontaneous, and
but that was like forever ago.
Well, forever ago, but also he thinks that it interweaves with the phenomenal world presently. So,
okay.
So he seems to think that, that freedom still permeates everything.
Is this like what time? What do you know what the era that this guy lived in?
Yeah, so it's like he's writing this in 1790s around.
Oh, is it that? There. It's that old?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. I didn't know he was that old. I thought Kant was like.
Yeah, he's the birth of the Enlightenment, so he's the birth of kind of modern philosophy.
So do you know a lot about the world in which, comparatively speaking, he would have lived in? Like, did he have fame before he died? Because if he's having people come to him and be like, "This is your first draft of what freedom is. Try it again." Like, what is it? Is this all in academia, kind of in the upper ups? Like, it's not like it was it's not like philosophy was ever cool back then.
Yeah, well, although it was cooler, it was a more mainstream than probably it is now in America. In France, there's still a bit of a scene, but Kant, I don't know how well known it is, but he wrote half a dozen books when he was young, and they weren't that interesting. And then he wrote this famous book, and that's what made him a famous philosopher. That was the Critique of Pure Reason.
Cool.
And that's what kind of made him famous. But I don't know how well known he was outside of philosophy. That's a good question. I'm terrible at biography,
And this is adapting what he says to anxiety. But like, what is his big
idea?
If you were to see like at a cartoon of him somewhere that was like like a flashcard or something, what would it say what was his brand?
His brand was that we don't have access to ultimate reality. Our minds are structured in such a way, we experience the world in a certain way, but we don't have access to what he calls what the thing is in itself. What reality is in itself is kind of like closed off to us. And then, so what he did is he tried to draw the limits of our reason. He kind of drew out what we can know and what we can't know. So he's very important for science, because he kind of drew out how sciences can explain the natural world. And then he said basically what's called metaphysics doesn't really get us anywhere. So when you start asking questions about whether the universe has a first cause, he says you're not going to get anywhere.
Interesting. Yeah. Okay.
So that's what he did, and then there's a whole pile of stuff. People come after him to critique that or whatever, but he did this phenomenal work where he basically said that that human beings have to think in a certain way, and we don't have access to ultimate reality.
I heard this theory one time that was, I don't know where or when, but it was like basically because we evolved to basically promote reproduction and survival, there is a theory that everything we see and our sensory experiences themselves could be complete lies based on what we need to survive. Like if we were surrounded right now by just the most horrific, cataclysmic, apocalyptic scene in the world, it might behoove us as a species to perceive it in a different way. But I was like, that's kind of crazy. That's like very science fiction-y a little bit, where it's like we're walking amongst things that we don't know about. It's also got like a ring of like the old evangelical like spiritual warfare thing to it, where it's like, oh no, there could be monsters everywhere right now, but it's in our best interest evolutionarily to not be able to see them. It's fun. It's a fun idea. I don't believe it, but it's cool.
There's a little bit of that. That's kind of like a kind of like caricature of what Kant's saying. But
really?
Because Kant's kind of saying that we're surrounded by a world that we can only experience through intellectual categories and sense experience.
Yeah.
And so we don't have access to it beyond what he calls the transcendental categories, and we don't have access to it beyond our sensory perceptions.
So good. Yeah, it's so fun. It's like there's all those studies in like clinical psychology of how you can't trust your senses and how like you remember things completely differently. And Malcolm Gladwell, who we've talked about on this podcast, who you love and are a huge fan of and agree with everything that he says, he has a very good podcast on like the Brian Williams thing that happened, where Brian Williams, the news anchor, got under a bunch of trouble because he kind of fabricated the story, and then he started talking about basically making a case for events that happen. I forget
I don't know the story.
Brian he got kicked off of NBC. Now he's on MSNBC or whatever, or something. But for basically fudging a story about being in like a helicopter that went down in the war in Iraq or something, and all these people were like, all the soldiers were like, no, he was in another helicopter, he wasn't in this, and and he apologized for it later. But Malcolm Gladwell then went into all of these things about events that can happen that are very rare, that are so uniting that it gives a very rare opportunity to be able to study certain elements of psychology, like 9/11 happening in the way the Twin Towers falling and all this stuff, and people will remember in vivid detail where they were and be completely wrong about it, which I think is really cool and kind of crazy.
You see that with there's a certain age where kids, if one kid falls, the other kid cries, because they're so it's called kind of an introjective projective stage, where they're not one and they're not two. They're in this weird kind of mix where they're kind of in between. And so, one person is hurt and they feel it in their body.
So crazy.
And so in times of very big crisis and trauma, people's distinction between subject and object kind of close again. And in that space, you can remember something that never happened to you, that you witnessed, but weirdly you remember it as if it was happening to you.
Yeah, it's nuts. And it just is I assume it has something to do with your brain trying to protect you against something that you don't understand, which can probably lead into a lot of the other stuff we're going to talk about.
And it's also our most primal experience. Like with the infant, is not a subject yet. So like our most primal experience is this it's a time called transitional relationship, where you're not separate from, say, your mother, but you're not one with her, and you have a teddy bear as a transitional object. But like that's a very primal experience of being human, is that before we feel ourselves separate from the world, we feel ourselves weirdly intertwined.
As part of it.
Yeah, we don't.
There's no boundary.
Where we start and stop, and that's why psychotic experiences, people don't know where their body is, out of body experiences. That's actually a primal kind of experience.
I read, and this is kind of a plug, but I read that article in like nybooks.com or whatever that was from, I'm blanking on her name. Her, Webster.
Jameson Webster. Oh
yeah. It was. Did you read it?
Oh yeah, a New York Times article.
New York Times, something like that.
Well, which one? Because I think there's only the one. She's written lots in various places.
Oh really? I'll read more. I really love the way she wrote it. It was called Psychoanalysis and a Plague. And it was basically like it opens on how Freud is writing a letter about the death of his daughter and sort of talking about psychoanalysis in a plague and using it, I guess, figuratively. I don't know. I didn't really understand it. But it was like her experience doing psychoanalysis in a quote-unquote plague, where she is supposed to be the thing that people transfer onto. But as a result of this big unifying cataclysmic event, for the first time, she's getting inquiries from her patients being like, are you okay? How is this going?
Oh, wow, yeah.
And it was interesting to read because I've had similar experiences. I don't do psychoanalysis, but my therapist I'm like, I used to ask him how he was doing, but then very early on, he told me that like I'll always say that I'm doing fine or I'm doing well. He was like, it's not He's like, even if I'm not, he was like, even if I'm having a horrible day, I'll just tell you I'm fine. And so then I kind of stopped asking. But now with this whole thing, I'm like, how you doing? And he's like, good. He's like, it's good to see a human. And I'm like, yeah, well, great, thank you. We sit very far apart. Yeah. Anyway, so yeah, psychoanalysis, inner plague, blah blah blah. Changes your perspective. Very unifying. Remember things differently. Brain's crazy. Let's get back to Kant.
Well, yeah, and then this third stage of Kant is where it gets really interesting, and this can help us understand anxiety.
Sweet.
So his third way of theorizing freedom is when he starts to go, okay, everything in the physical world is cause and effect. Everything is a chain of a network of deterministic chains.
Yeah.
But he says something kind of interrupts that world of pure cause and effect, and he calls it a categorical imperative. And a categorical imperative, so basically he talks about what's called hypothetical imperatives, and that's where we decide to do something because of our desire. I want to eat that, I want to buy that, right? We've got all of these decisions we make, and they're based on our desires, and all of those are determined by how we grew up and our biology, chemistry, all of that. But then he says, in the midst of that, creatures of language, human beings, they feel that their world is invaded by something that transcends desire, that something that transcends cause and effect. And it is a demand to act in a way that is indifferent to your desire. So basically, it's called a categorical imperative. It's when you feel that there's something you should do, no matter how painful it is, or something that you shouldn't do, no matter how much pleasure you would get from doing it. So, this is an experience we all feel. If you're taking a bribe, there's a small part of you that thinks, I shouldn't take a bribe. Even though I'm getting money, I'm getting something, there's a small part of you says that I should just refuse this. And so Kant says to be human is to experience this realm of the purely rational that's not connected to desire at all.
Yeah.
That actually, and even if you don't ever act on it, you feel it, right? To be human is to feel this interruption of the rational that's got nothing to do with how good or bad it is for you.
So is Kant saying that freedom basically is taking a stand? Basically going, this is what, but it's not necessarily, that's still, I guess, how you feel, but it's not your emotions driving it. It's like your rational brain going, this is the conclusion you came to, this is what you're going to do.
Yeah, it's like 2 + 2 = 4, right? So at a rational level, doesn't matter how much you want it to be 5, no matter how much you think about it, 2 + 2 = 4. That's kind of like it's a truth no matter how invested you are. He thinks that we experience that type of imperative, that type of demand in our lives, that is basically, you should never, say, murder an innocent person, no matter what.
Okay.
No matter what. And it's nothing to do with your pleasure or your pain. And the funny thing is, it's not about you doing it. It's just literally that this enters your world. You can't help but experience this.
Yeah.
This imperative. And this is where I differ from Kant a little bit. But the idea is that this means we're no longer embedded in the world. We would be animals if we just had a hypothetical imperative. We'd just be purely embedded in our world.
Now, explain the hypothetical imperative versus
the categorical imperative.
Well, one more time.
Yeah, so hypothetical imperative is where you have choices, whether I'll have tea or coffee, and you choose related to your desire.
Okay.
So it's purely what Kant calls pathological. It's just what you desire, what you want.
Your thing.
Utilitarianism, maximizing your pleasure and minimizing your pain. And then the categorical imperative is this sense that there are some things that we should do, whatever the cost. There's some actions that are beyond calculation, beyond desire. And it's just the very fact that is an experience is a short-circuiting of our determinism. We're short-circuited. We suddenly feel like we suddenly start to feel like, what should I do? How should I act? That questioning that maybe a snail doesn't have or a rock doesn't have, we have.
So I'm usually able to connect as you're talking to what we're going to get to, and I can't right now. So how does this?
Yes.
Let's keep
going, right? So what you're left with Kant is this idea that we as human beings, we're going along in our world of cause and effect, and something keeps entering our world and destabilizing it and kind of causing us to go, should I really do this? Should I not? So then Søren Kierkegaard comes along, and he says that this experience of not being at one with yourself, of questioning, of going, what should I do? How should I act in the world? He calls that experience of deadlock, he calls that spirit. So what is spirit for Kierkegaard? It is the fact that we are not at one with ourselves. We're in the world but not of it. We question, what does it mean to be human? What should I do? Who am I?
Okay.
Those questions which are a result of this short circuiting. And Kierkegaard says that's called spirit.
Okay.
And he also calls it the dizziness of freedom. This experience of what should I do? Who should I be? Right? That question.
I just used that phrase on my girlfriend the other day. We were talking about this whole experience, obviously, and we were mentioning the dizzy. I said I think Kierkegaard calls it the dizziness of freedom, where there's so many options of things to do, and there's so many things we feel like we should be doing that we are basically stuck in a paralysis of inaction.
Yeah, that's it. And that experience is exactly why, this is why for Kierkegaard, he's like the first existentialist. It becomes massive for them, because the idea for the existentialist is kind of like everything is freedom. That this paralysis, this feeling of, I don't know what I should do. Like a dog is a dog, a cat's a cat. A human's like, what should I do? What does it mean to be human? Should I answer the phone to my parents or should I not? Should I see my friends? Like every time we question, we are showing evidence of the short-circuitedness of our life.
The fact that we're just like, I don't know.
I don't know. Yeah, that's it. And it's funny that I love the way Kierkegaard calls that spirit. It's very...
Yeah, I don't get why he calls it spirit. Why does he call it spirit?
Because it's what makes us singular. If we were purely caught up in cause and effect, we would just be... automatons, robotic machines. If we were purely caught up in reason, we'd also be not free. We'd just be pure rational kind of beings. The fact that we're in the middle, the fact that we're kind of short-circuited by the two, is what makes us individuals. It's what makes us singular. And he calls that antagonism spirit, which is connected to the philosopher Hegel.
You came ready to play today, Pete.
Right. Well, I feel that this might be a heavy one.
This is a heavy one, yeah.
That's for the Valley Folk.
Yeah, I like
channel. It. But you know what? It's going to be very practical. If people keep going with us, it's about to hit the ground.
The 40 people that are still with us, thank you.
Yes. Okay, well then where does it hit the ground? This is it. Then Kierkegaard calls the feeling of the dizziness of freedom, this feeling of I don't know what I need to do, the rug's being pulled away from me, I'm experiencing what's called negation, I'm experiencing a lack, I don't know what I should do.
Yeah.
That's what he calls dread or anxiety.
There we go.
So there we go. So
train just pulled into the station, everybody. Long ass train.
Yep. But the key is, the reason why I wanted to take the time to get there is because if you follow that route, you get to the point of going, anxiety is essential to being human. It's the evidence of our spirit. It's the evidence of our freedom.
Yeah.
Is anxiety. Because anxiety is precisely the sense of, I'm not who I think I should be. Or there's imposter syndrome, I'm not who I am, or there's guilt, I'm not who I would like to ethically be, or there's the existential dimension, I lack meaning. All of these.
That one's my favorite.
Oh yeah, that's a good one.
Biggie. I was talking, I think we were doing a live stream, me, Joe, and Steve, the other day, and we were talking about Santa Steve, the character Steve does, good, and he was talking about how people often have expressed to him privately that before being on the video or sitting on his lap, they experienced so much anxiety and so much nervousness about sitting on this Mexican man's dirty lap, and I was like, all right, I was like, you're a grown man wearing a Santa costume saying incredibly inappropriate things to other grown adults while they sit on your lap. Like, that's not... I was like, they should feel some level of anxiety. And he felt really bad about it. And I was like... And Joe made a great point where he was like, people want to match your you're funny, and they get in their heads about it and they get nervous. And I was like, it's stage fright. Like stage fright before you go, like if I'm about to go do stand up and get on stage, there is a nervousness there and an anxiety, but I know that if I don't have that, it's not going to be a good show because something in me isn't fully there.
Yeah. And that experience of them sitting on the lap, that's anxiety. It's an unknowing. They don't know what's going to happen. So what Steve's able to create is this experience where you do not know what's going to happen.
Yeah.
And I guess for a comedian, although not for improvisation, but if you're doing a set, you know exactly where it's going, you know what you're doing, so you feel less anxiety.
Yeah, there's a little bit more of a, I have monkey bars I can hold on to a little bit.
Exactly, you're in control, but when you go into an environment where you don't know what's going to happen, that's again what Kierkegaard calls anxiety, because you're confronting a type of unknowing, a type of radical discontinuity. And that is at a basic level what anxiety is. It kind of, there's other ways to kind of make it a bit more, flesh it out a bit more. But for Kierkegaard, primarily, we have this sense that we're in the world but not of it. We call that not at oneness with the world. We call that spirit. And spirit, the evidence of spirit is anxiety. Mm-hmm. But the danger is we try to hide from the anxiety. So we try to have structures that make everything work. So, like the obsessive who keeps everything in its place, who can't stand anything being out of place. Yeah. They're trying to control their environment. Or we try to disavow the anxiety, or we get drowned by it. For Kierkegaard, it's like, no, there's a way of somehow embracing our anxiety.
That's nice.
But in this current climate, people feel anxious just because everything's uncertain, whether that's their jobs, whether it's their life, or whether it's the government. Like, the anxiety is produced by you, what Nietzsche would say, by staring into the abyss. We encounter the void at the very core of reality in moments like this.
Yeah, it's like the being like, okay, this whole thing could crumble.
Yeah.
The whole system could crumble. And then you're like, well, fortunately there are structures in place that are so rock steady and so pure, like the presidency of the United. Okay, well, now that guy's in office and he's kind of revealing that there's a lot of BS around this whole thing, for better or worse. And now we have a pandemic, and then you have people who hate them. Yeah, it's all just like, it's all falling apart.
Yeah.
And realizing that it's falling apart and could continue to fall apart leads to the inevitable conclusion that, oh, okay, so all of this could go, which means I could go, and that's terrifying.
Yeah. And it's like there's a famous painting, and Lacan uses this as an example of what's called the gaze, but if anybody's listening still, it's called...
They're listening. It's good.
Hans Holbein's The Ambassadors. So if they type it in, you see it. There's this famous painting called The Ambassadors. And when you look at it, it's two people. They're they're young and powerful. They've got symbols of authority and wealth all around them. So you're looking at this very classical painting, and it's two people who are figures of authority, figures of culture, figures of intelligence. Mm-hmm. But there's a weird blot at the bottom of the painting, and it's so out of place. You just see this little blot. But then if you look at the painting from an angle, the blot suddenly turns into a skull, and the skull is staring at you. But you only see it if you look at the painting from the bottom left-hand angle and look up at it, and that blot's a skull. That experience is like the experience of seeing that within the solid order of reality, there is this tear, there is this lack, and it's staring at you. Cool. Which is kind of what Nietzsche means when he says, if you stare into the abyss will stare into you. It's this experience of you encounter the non-at-oneness of everything. You experience the lack that exists within reality, and that experience of the skull looking at you is kind of the experience of anxiety.
Whoa, that's cool.
Yeah.
I want to see that painting now.
Yeah, it's a really cool painting. It's right there, actually.
Really? Yeah, I really like it. Well, we can put it in the thing. Two guys. Okay, this is not at all what I. Oh yeah. I think I've seen this before.
And then you look at it from that angle, and it's
yeah. That's fun. One of those like forced perspective things.
Yeah, I mean, and it's a very old piece. It's really funny that Holbein's doing something so interesting, you know.
I like it a lot. Yeah. Yeah. The staring into the abyss thing, especially because it's like, I don't know. I feel like this is such a great. This is such a bad time for us not to be consistent with this podcast, because it's such a good time for, I think, people to be like exploring a lot of these things. But the idea of staring into the abyss is so interesting, because I know that when I feel like it's happening, or when I'm like going somewhere mentally, going down that rabbit hole, there is a sense of weird invasion that happens where it's like I feel so separate from everything in this whole experience, and in life in general. Like my inner world is very loud and very entertaining, and I'm comfortable there. But when I get into that zone and I look into the abyss, which is very dramatic sounding, there is a feeling of like permeation almost that to me doesn't feel necessarily like nothing is at one. It almost feels like it feels like it's connecting everything, like the death of the permeation of just it, the House of Cards thing is we're a part of all of it. So I don't know.
No, that and that's the key. I mean, the difference between, you know, Søren Kierkegaard and then kind of New Age philosophies or perennial philosophies is that some of these New Age philosophies, they're all about the oneness, and they're all about finding a substantial whole.
Yeah.
But Kierkegaard and the direction he pulls is all about finding that what's called the not at oneness of the one, the fact that everything is there's tears within reality. But the thing is that Kierkegaard's doing is he's saying that when you encounter the abyss, when you encounter the fact that everything is fragile and there's chaos hard baked into reality, actually that's not terrifying. That's where the salvation is. That's where, when you become comfortable with that, you realize that we're all in the same boat, that whenever I feel anxious, that's a reflection of something true about the nature of reality and the nature of everything. And the key is, when I don't think like that, I always fantasize that someone has it all together. We've talked about this before, but you start to fantasize someone who's not in deadlock with themselves. You start to fantasize others who've got it all together. But when you see into the abyss, you realize that sometimes the people who say they've got it all together are just the ones who are covering over their despair. That's what Kierkegaard was saying. They're just covering over their despair.
Yeah.
That actually staring into realizing that we're all alone.
Yeah.
Realizing that we're all kind of alienated is what frees us from alienation.
I was thinking the other day about, because when you mentioned the imagining someone else out there that has it all together, I was thinking about how my mom and a lot of moms, they're so good at folding laundry. Like it's like everything is just really nicely stacked and flat, and I was like, moms have it figured out. Like they know how to make the food, they do the dishes, and they know how to like, and then dads can come in and they can change the bulbs and they could fix the water heater. And I'm like, parents just know things. They just got it. They figured it out. And then I was like, wait a minute. That's not true at all. They don't know what they're doing. And even if they know how to fold stuff, they only know how to fold stuff because they've been folding stuff for way longer than they wanted to have been folding stuff.
Because you're lazy and don't fold
exactly.
your own stuff.
And I'm a sniveling snot kid. And so now my mom has this incredible talent where she can fold my laundry well. And the only reason she could do it well is because she had to. And she probably resents it because she could have been spending that time painting and becoming a person that was actually who she wanted to be, rather than this laundry folding, stay-at-home mom. So it was a fun little thought process of being like, oh yeah, she doesn't know what she's she probably is upset about the very thing that I'm like idolizing. I'm like, wow, how does she know how to load the dishwasher that well? And it's like, because that's what she did. And it's like, doesn't mean that she's got it all figured out. But from my perspective, growing up, it was like, this is what an adult is. This is what life is. It's someone who pays the bills. I don't know how to balance a checkbook to this day. I have no idea how to do it. But when I hear that term, I go, that's an adult. That's someone who's got it figured out. And then I'm like, man, I'm 33. I should probably start considering myself an adult.
But that's the very experience that's the first time where we as human beings, I think, discover a little hint of the chaos that's at the heart of the universe, is when we realize that our parents are not substantial, whole, complete,
perfect
perfect people. And that's kind of like the first experience of of realizing that everything's permeated by deadlock.
It's
because
the big
before
one, yeah.
that, before that, you're fantasizing your parents or some other who's all together. I don't have it all together, but they do.
Yeah.
And the moment when you see your parents, or even when you see kids asking their parents questions, repeatedly asking questions, often parents are going like, and sometimes it is, oh, my child's very inquisitive, but it can also be, the enjoyment of the child discovering the impotence of the parent.
It's the raptor in Jurassic Park checking everything, checking every wire for the weakness so it can escape.
Oh, very good. Yeah, that's it. Yeah, so it's like, oh, look, my child's very inquisitive. No, they just want. They're finding it. They're finding your weakness.
Why? There it is, and then the kid's dead. Yeah, they say don't meet your heroes, but the only thing worse is being created by them. There you go. There's a fun tidbit for you.
What was the second? I never heard the second bit. Because I've heard them saying never meet your heroes, but never.
The only thing worse is being created by them, which is your parents.
But
I just made that up.
Oh, did you just? Oh,
yeah.
Okay.
It's a philosophy. I'm the most philosopher.
Yeah.
So the New Age stuff, that I've been thinking a lot about my own inability to put any of this into words that actually make sense, because I'm such an I just get my information from you, regurgitate it, and make it sound like I thought of it myself. Not really, but a lot of times. But the unifying theory between so many of these things is like the connectedness of the New Age world and this oneness. And then there is this, the dualistic, like there's the bad stuff in the world, but the darkness is what allows there to be light. And without the darkness, you cannot have light. And then you get into psychoanalysis that's like, there's only darkness, but there are blips of light along the way. And if you enter all the darkness, it's light on the other side. And it's so interesting because all these things I feel like complement one another, but I don't think that they're necessarily in line. And it's fun to kind of a la carte, like take certain things in certain moments. And I like doing that. But I was thinking about the title for my my next stand-up thing. I was thinking about the title Magical Thinking. That's the working title right now.
Nice.
And getting into, because I want to do a bit on being a wizard and how I am a wizard, and prove it through like all of these coincidental crazy things that have happened as a result of my quote-unquote magical thinking, which obviously it's all going to be, it'll be true stories, but building a sarcastic conclusion. But in thinking about it and in kind of outlining it, I was getting into like there's like the secret. You say what you want and then you put it out there and eventually it happens. And it's a fun thing. And I wish there was something that just connected all of it, but I guess there is, and it's Jesus.
Yes. Well, it's interesting that Kierkegaard, who was a Christian, he is really central to the idea that what makes us human is precisely our not at oneness with ourselves. That actually, if we always knew what we were supposed to do, or if we always got what we wanted, we would be reduced to some sort of mechanism. And that to be human is to be anxious, to be not at one with oneself, to be in deadlock and in contradiction with oneself. That's fine. Yeah.
Yeah, I like the word mechanism. I like the idea of if you just get everything you want, you're a machine. That's like out, like it's like saying a demand and the demand's coming to you, and it's like, well, that would be a very boring life.
Yeah, because it's kind of the opposite of The Secret. Because in the idea of The Secret is, Kierkegaard would say, if you get The Secret, as in you got a world where you got everything you wanted, you wouldn't find yourself happy. You would find yourself disappearing. You'd find yourself melancholic. You'd find yourself losing spirit.
Is that it's kind of related to that study that came out that was like the best amount of money you can have is like 5 to 10 million or something. Were you telling me about that?
I know the theory. I don't know if I was telling you, but I know that the theory is because you need enough to, lots of things are covered, you can do whatever you want, but not enough so that you can want more. Is that part of it?
Yeah, not so much that you have no fear, no drive, no stress, because then it becomes kind of like probably a lot of people are experiencing being stuck in their house right now, of just like, I have nothing to do.
Yeah, and that's why I wanted to start off with Kant, because one of Kant's, and it's not what he's famous for, but actually it's maybe one of his greatest insights, is he introduced the idea that what pulls us out of the animalistic world is precisely a short circuit.
Mm-hmm.
It's precisely kind of the intrusion of a demand that's impossible to fulfill, and a demand that gets in, that basically ties us up in knots, that gets us into a deadlock, and it's precisely that basically makes us free and makes
Mm-hmm.
us humans. And then Kierkegaard builds on that, and then then you move into kind of existentialism. But all of this is based on the very notion of there's an intrusion of something into our world that short circuits us, that makes us discontent, unhappy, and unsure. And that very discontent is what enables us to find joy. It's the very thing that allows us to have depth in our lives.
It's such a fun, like, there's like such a universal truth to that that's so obvious, and yet I forget it all the time. Yeah. And immediately I'm like, if I'm experiencing anxiety as a generally not anxious person, I'm like, what the heck how do I fix this immediately? I know in the past, this week specifically has been the only week thus far where I've just been like edgy, and I don't realize that I don't even know necessarily that it is anxiety, but it's something along those lines where I'm finding myself just annoyed by things, and I'm kind of irritable, and I'm like, what is this happening? And I'm like, oh, I'm just pissy because this is weird. And it's like, I'm not, I wish I'm not very good at being like, oh, I'm experiencing anxiety, until after I've already been like miserable for, I guess that's maybe how it works. But yeah, the ability to identify what it is and know that it's part of life is so comforting. But I don't do that as a knee-jerk reaction. As a knee-jerk reaction, I'm like, I'm anxious, and this isn't good, and this isn't good, and it's a phase, and it'll pass. But you're right. That's assuming that the status quo or the default is this feeling of wholeness and goodness, and it never was. It's not like a pandemic happened and everybody got stressed out. It's just like a pandemic happened and everybody got more stressed out, or everybody realized how stressed out they already were because now they didn't have all the distractions of
exactly. It kind of uncovers like a divorce or like a illness, or these things often uncover the truth. They kind of sadly they uncover the reality of the frailty and the chaos of being. And the trick is how to not run from that, but somehow find a way to kind of embrace it.
Right. Yeah. It's a very, and I think in relationships too, it's like you're confronted with being present with someone the entire time. Dude, I was watching what's his name? President
Trump.
Trump. That's right. I
remembered that. Yeah. You don't like to say his name.
I don't like to say his name. Trump. 45. But I've been watching.
I think I've watched all of them. Actually, really? I find it very interesting to watch. But anyway, keep going.
I find it interesting to watch for a time, and then I kind of turned it off. But someone was asking about. I want to get your thoughts on this, and this may or may not be related to what we're talking about. But somebody was asking about the rise in domestic violence that has gone up as a result of people staying home all the time. Crime decreased, domestic violence shoots up. Mm-hmm. And Trump's response was basically along the lines of, this is why we need to get people back to work. We need to get people back to work because these people need to be out of the house. They need to be separated from each other so that they're not getting hurt. Now, on one hand, I'm like, okay, yeah, I mean, like, you need to get away from an abusive situation, but it's assuming that they're going to stay in that abusive situation, and it's assuming that the job and the work that they do, the labor that they perform, is not only to put food on the table, but also to keep them, literally a form of protection from their partner. Yeah. And I was like, that seems bad. Yeah. And I don't know exactly how. I mean, because sure, we all should get back to work. This is why we got to go back. We got to go back to work. We got to go back to work. But to throw in not getting beat up by your partner or abused by your partner as a reason for you to head back to that job seems gross.
Yeah, no, that's funny because, I can completely understand why in the heat of the moment that was a good basic answer is, we need to get people out there. They're getting antsy. But it is.
But what does that say?
You're saying is like, because in one sense it's just exposing the dysfunctionality that the relationship already was. Yeah. Like that's what it's doing. So it's kind of like, but he couldn't say, well, It's just showing that relationship was already dysfunctional. You just didn't know it.
That's true.
Which you would, you can't really say that, but that is an interesting point you're making. Is that if when you're in the same space as your partner and it all blows up, maybe that's just exposing a fundamental crisis in the relationship that somehow you've hidden for 10 years.
Yeah, which is, it's weird to see a Republican president when faced with a question about an inherent problem that is like spread throughout the system, just be like, yeah, well, you should go to work and work harder is what you should do.
Yeah.
It's like that'll solve it. But at the same time, he couldn't turn around and be like, well, LegalZoom does divorces too, so deal with it.
That's very good. That reminds me actually of Todd McGowan has a good video online. We should link to it. But he talks about how ideology is designed basically to cover over the chaos, to cover over this tear in reality, to cover over the chaos. So ideology doesn't encourage you to look into it, doesn't encourage you to tarry with it. It tries to say everything's fine, everything's good. It tries to avoid a confrontation with it. I think that's a really good definition of ideology. By the way, are you thinking you can hear that sound?
Yeah. Can you hear it?
Yeah, but I don't think they'll hear it.
That's great.
So if we don't mention it, no one will.
Yeah, I don't care. As long as you can't hear it. It was like you talking about something and then me coming back, and I can tell you can tell that I wasn't listening, but you still summarize it a little bit, and that's the definition of ideology. I'm like, oh, the air conditioning's on.
I could turn it off.
No, I don't give a crap. I'm new to the world again, so I'm like, wow, air conditioning.
Air conditioning, yeah.
Things are happening.
The ideology thing is just that ideology's primary function is to say that everything's good, everything's under control, is to kind of get your life into that type of mechanical kind of thing.
Jedi mind tricking yourself.
Yeah. And then so ideology critique is about creating spaces where people confront the chaos that is within their lives, individually and communally.
Do you think that this is going to have a notable effect on people in terms of a positive effect on the like being forced to deal with their own anxieties? Obviously, excluding situations like that are abusive or whatever. But would you ever imagine a situation in this world where everyone's at home at the same time and alone with their thoughts?
No.
For a philosopher, I feel like that would be like it's like Christmas.
Yeah, wow, it is. Yeah, I'd never have been able to imagine that.
Yeah.
That could have happened. And happened within like 2 weeks, because I remember it felt like 2 weeks. It felt like I was talking about this coronavirus thing, and I was like, oh, this is interesting, what's going on? And then kind of within 2 weeks, it seemed like we were all in our houses.
Yeah.
Like, it's incredible.
In like, not overnight, but kind of overnight.
Yeah.
Like, where it's like, okay, great, I guess we're... I was thinking about your first when you were talking about Kant and the imperatives, the hypothetical imperative and the categorical imperative, and I was thinking about how in this experience, the way it started, and I'm hesitant to say this because it sounds like I'm a conspiracy theorist a little bit, but I'm not. But I am a little bit, but I'm not.
It's 5G.
It's 5G.
Yeah.
The towers are everywhere, especially in all those countries where they're not. But yeah, the 5G thing is so great. Oh God, dude, I read a friggin' some of my extended family or friends of family on Facebook share some gold sometimes, and there was one about how it's the Hollywood elite that has it because of the drink that they consume called something or other. That's a special type of drink that makes them famous or some shit.
Wow.
It's so good, and I was like,
baby blood.
No, it was some I forget the name of it, but I Googled it and like looked at it out of one eye because it was making me so uncomfortable that like it was being shared as though it was fact when it was just pure conspiracy theory. Anyway, categorical imperative versus hypothetical imperative. I was thinking about that in relation to the way my brain has processed this whole experience, because I remember being in London when all the news stories were breaking, and then as the social distancing...
were you in London when this started?
I remember looking at we were watching the news and seeing it explode in Wuhan, and we were like, oh, okay. And it was 2 weeks later that everything was locked down and all the travel was cut off. So we were like, thank God we came back when we did, because we would have been stuck in London, which would have been kind of cool actually, but it really wouldn't have been after a while. So I remember seeing this stuff, and as the leaving work was happening, as it being like, okay, we're not going to come into work today, we're going to see how this goes, and then it became running out of toilet paper, and the grocery stores are empty, and then Amazon's not delivering, and all this stuff was sort of piling, and then Tom Hanks had it. There was a logical mode that I tried to go into, or at least attempted a rational mode, where it was like, something about this is weird and off and different from the way life normally is. So I'm going to listen to what people are saying on the news, even though I'm not a huge fan of the media, and I'm going to stay at home, and I'm going to cancel the stand-up shows. I'm going to cancel the trip with my dad and brother. I'm going to do all these things. But emotionally, I did not feel like those steps were necessary, and that's the part that I don't necessarily like talking about, because obviously people were like, the sky was falling for a lot of people, and they were experiencing that emotional thing. But I also saw the people who were completely devoid of an emotional response to this whole thing, and were instead, those were the people that were like, I'm just going to go out, I'm going to do my thing, I'm going to go to the church gathering, I'm going to go to the party, it's spring break, blah, blah, blah. So I was thinking, like, fortunately, I did not rely on the emotional motivation, the I want to do this, so I'm going to do it thing to do my behavior. I at least attempted to go, I'm going to play it as safe as possible. But it didn't feel like I was doing the right thing. It didn't feel like I was doing the thing that I wanted to do. It felt like I was playing it safe and being, I guess, adult. And then as the virus started to affect more and more people, it affected just enough people that were close to me in some way, a couple degrees removed maybe, where the emotional impact hit me like a ton of bricks as it came into my life further and further and invaded my space a little further and further, where I was like, oh my God, thank God. Like, why I'm not doing enough. Like, even though I was doing all the things, I was like, I need to be doing this. I'm going to get this. I'm going to go to, we're going to get all this like water and bunker stuff, and like it went into high gear. And it's it's very interesting to me that people need some kind of an emotional kick in the chest to do something, and it's terrifying because in a situation like this, your behavior could actually result in the death of someone you love or yourself.
Well, where's the conspiracy theory bit? You mentioned that
it's not conspiracy theory, but the whole time it was happening, there was a little part of me that was going, it can't be this bad. It can't be as bad as they're going to say. Like, the news loves to blow things out of proportion. My mom put this a really good way, because they're in Florida, and she was like, it's like hurricanes. She's like, every year in Florida when a hurricane is coming, the news acts like it is going to be the most decimating thing in the world, and it never is. And I was talking to a buddy of mine who lives in New York, and he went down to Florida for when this all went down, and I think he's still in quarantine. But he was like, we were raised in Florida. He was like, we were raised around a media that sensationalized everything. So there is a little bit of an inherent skepticism that comes with the media. Then when you get into politics, it's a whole other thing, because it's a red state too. So then there's a hatred of the media that's like independent. Plus you have all these people blowing everything else out of proportion. So I can understand why I thought that. It wasn't necessarily a conspiracy theory, but it was definitely a little like, I don't know if it's a conspiracy theory to believe that fear produces ratings and that kind of thing. But I also didn't want to get into that boat and be like, oh, this is just because they want it, because that just sounds like I'm trying to comfort myself, and it sounds like I'm trying to do something to make sense of something that is not capable of making sense of. I don't know if any of that made sense. Did any of that?
No, I mean,
I feel like I haven't talked in 4 days, so I'm just like vomiting words at you.
Yeah, well, no, there's loads in that, because one is that's just the difficulty it is to kind of get your head around. Because even a friend of mine listened to our podcast that we put out a few weeks ago, and that was a point where we were just talking about maybe we should cancel stuff. I just cancelled Wake, and you were saying, oh, I might have to cancel my comedy shows to see how it goes. And then by the time it came out, which was just a few days later, it was just so obvious that everything had to be cancelled. Like that didn't age well.
I know. It didn't age well, and it didn't because that's the great thing about the way we podcast. It comes out later, and then people are like, of course you're gonna get it. And that's how it happened with me too. Probably the time that podcast came out, I was sitting there going, thank God I canceled that, because that was
when you talked about that, it was literally about just the timing of it, it was about 2 days before it became obvious that everything had to close down.
Yeah.
So, but it was a couple of days before. It was that point we're going, am I going to have to cancel? And then literally 24, 48 hours later, it's like obviously.
Yeah. Which also there was no chain of command where it was like, who do we go to for what we're supposed to do? Like if I have a job and I have shows, I'm used to someone going, don't go into work today, come into work. But this was a weird mix of like, I know I'm not going to do this show, and I'm just waiting on them to tell me I'm not going to do the show, or no, we're not going to go into work. But shouldn't there be like a government saying don't do it? And then they did start saying it, but then it wasn't super enforced at first. And then LA, we took the reins and we were just like, no, everyone's going to stay at home forever. Nothing you're doing in this town is important anyway. So just stay at home.
Yes, that's right. Yeah, this is the first place that can shut down. There's no essential work happening here at all. Yeah.
You don't need to do your trivia bidet right now, Elliot. You could stay home.
Need it.
The aging thing is so funny too. Yeah, because the emotional impact, the obviousness of all of it didn't hit me till much later.
Yeah.
So.
But we're always looking, that's one of the ways we try to avoid anxiety. One is magical thinking, where we think that, everything's under control, everything's great. Two is looking for an authority that knows the truth, knows what to do. And then also magical rituals, that you do things that actually don't have any real effect, but as long as you do them, you feel like you're
in motion. Yeah.
But when you kind of realize, only briefly, but people will have experienced this probably at the moment, is that when you get a feeling that nobody really knows what's happening, that there isn't a substantial authority that has the truth. Now, of course, the government comes in and then it reestablishes that a little bit, but you do get a sense in which it's unprecedented, and even the experts are, having to scramble. That's an opportunity for Kierkegaard to get a glimpse into something that is profoundly true of reality. And again, his strategy is ultimately we have to not try to run from it or avoid it, but actually be able to make peace with that chaos, and then you'll make better decisions. Then you'll feel better. You'll not bury your head in the sand. You won't freeze up.
When it comes to making peace with anxiety, I'm assuming you don't mean a feeling of peace. You just mean a feeling of anxiety that you are at peace with.
Yeah, kind of like, I suppose, a feeling of the sense that you're comfortable, that nobody knows the answer. So Jean-Paul Sartre used an example. I think his example was this kid who didn't know whether to fight in the French resistance or to look after his elderly mother. He had these two options in front of him, and one was to make a big difference in one person's life, and two was to make a very small difference but in a world historical situation. And he went to, I think, a professor to basically try to find someone to tell him what to do. And what that young person had to realize is, you're going to have to make that decision. There's nobody can tell you which one you should do, and you have to be comfortable with being resolute in making a decision that nobody can answer for you.
Yeah, you'll never know if it was in some alternate universe the right or wrong decision.
It's just so anxiety, and by being able to be resolute in embracing the short circuit, the kind of the deadlock in our subjectivity, then that's making peace with your anxiety, which means that you no longer feel anxious. But in the Kierkegaardian sense, it's not because anxiety's gone, it's just because you're comfortable with you're not at oneness with the world.
Yeah.
You're comfortable at being in the world, but not of it.
Yeah. Yeah. That's it's good. That's good stuff, man. It reminds me, I was thinking of the multiple universe theory, and how we always, like in popular science, there's this idea that there's infinite universes, and there's a universe where I'm sitting, over there, and you're sitting here, and that's the only difference in the universe, as opposed to the, all the other ones or something. But like, I think I hate that. I think I'm over it. I don't like that. I think it's like an extension of the idea of heaven, where it makes it so that there is this alternative utopia or this alternative place. There's an alternate universe where I get up every day and I eat kale, and I don't eat, and I recycle everything, and I live off the land, and I have solar, and that's the better version of me that I find myself comparing myself to, or this imaginary version of myself that's out there in some other universe being like me to the umpteenth degree. And I just assume probably maybe not. Maybe don't even imagine that. Maybe just imagine this is what you are. This is the only version of you. This is all the time you got. And so just get comfortable.
Yes.
That's my advice for the anxiety that everybody is feeling. Which is
I like that. I like that. Yeah, because you could think possible world theory might be a way of people avoiding their anxiety by thinking they're making the right decision in the other universe.
Exactly. Yeah.
But no, this is what you got.
This is just this universe, and we got reality shows as presidents, so we're doing our thing. We're kind of a cool universe.
Yeah. Well, you got any takeaways?
Yeah.
Or was that your takeaway? That was a good takeaway.
That was a good takeaway. We'll take it. I'll take it. You can have it. The only takeaway I would say, is let's just keep seeing how this goes and trying to be rational and calm. And I hope genuinely that talking about anxiety as a whole and talking about these different ways of looking at it, I truly hope it helps people, because I do have a very I'm deeply worried about a lot of folks, not specifically, just in pure mass. Like, there's a lot of sadness and terror out there. Yeah. And so helping people is good, and also getting it in a good place with anxiety seems like not only the best thing to do for yourself, but also kind of for the world, because we need to be rational and at peace right now more than ever.
Yeah, very good.
Amen.
Well, my takeaway is, because we've been looking at Kierkegaard, my takeaway, I guess, is, like, from his perspective, there's no escape from this experience of the dizziness of freedom. So there's no escape. We want to try and escape, and Sartre calls that bad faith. It's when he used the example of a waiter who actually thinks he's a waiter, and that's bad faith. You try to lose yourself in your...
A waiter who thinks he's actually a waiter?
Yeah, it's great. He's watching this French Parisian waiter who's serving coffee, and he's being so Parisian, and he's being so perfect in how he serves his coffee, and Sartre's like, that guy thinks he's a waiter. Yeah. He's a waiter who thinks he's a waiter. And he's always in bad faith, because to be human is always to transcend your identities.
That's so good. Yeah. It'd be like, it's like that YouTuber thinks he's a YouTuber.
Yeah, that's it. There's a good joke in there, actually.
There's a very
definitely
good joke,
sketch for you to write.
All the YouTubers I know that are like, I'm a YouTuber, but really I do comedy, and I do this, like, if I had a friend that was like, I do YouTube and I love YouTube and I'm a YouTuber, I'd be like, I don't know that we can hang out. You're scared.
Yeah.
Anyway, go ahead.
So you can't escape that experience for Kierkegaard, and so the only thing you can do is you can disavow it, and then it's going to blow up in really bad ways.
That's a bad one.
Or you can try to explain it away, or you can try to use magical thinking. There's various things you can do, but Kierkegaard will say ultimately they'll all fail. The only thing you can do is find a way to sit with the anxiety, and that's very difficult to do, and maybe we can do a podcast about how to do that, but you find a way to tarry with it and to embrace it, and you actually will find your subjectivity, your spirit within that. So it's a nice way of thinking about it. It's like you can't run from it, so don't try. You run to the ends of the earth, it'll find you there. What you have to do, and it might involve art or drugs or therapy, it might involve whatever, but some way in which meditation, you find some way in which you can confront the demons and not run from them, because the demons are your freedom.
Yeah, meditation I'm a big fan of in that area, because I love that meditation does not attempt to fix the anxiety, at least from my experience with it. It's always like, sit with it, acknowledge it, see it, and then get back to just focusing and just breathing. I'm like, that's so helpful, because it does feel like a very physical way of enacting the philosophical part of just being like, it's here too. It's not going anywhere. Well, thank you, everybody.
Thank you. Let's hope the mics were on.
I think the mics were on. We'll find out. Even if it's not, we're uploading it. Please subscribe to the Fundamentalists on iTunes, and if you'd like to leave us a review, we appreciate it. And hopefully this episode ages better than the last one.
Yep.
And we wish everybody the best.
Yeah.
And follow Pete. Pete has a Patreon at patreon.com/Peter Rollins. The Valley Folk has a Patreon at patreon.com/The Valley Folk. And I also have a YouTube channel, youtube.com/Elliot Morgan, where you can see some of the other episodes if you have the curiosity to do so. Pete, it's been wonderful.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.